At our Geeky Somatic Lives with Annie Brook and the Brook Institute. And people are arriving. I hope you're arriving as well. Nice to see you all. Welcome, welcome. Today, and this whole month, we have been focusing on the nervous system and adoption. So let's all take a breath, because you might not have been adopted, but you still might want some good understanding of the nervous system. So take a moment and take your hand and place just the pads of your fingers sort of right under where your collarbones come together on the skin, and do a very gentle hello. Hello, welcome. Put your feet on the ground and do just a little pressure. Oh, you might think about just uplifting the heart, but don't worry about what you're doing as much as what does it feel like. What does this feel like to you when you use not pokey fingers, but gentle fingers? Right up to that sternal notch. You can shift your fingers around a little bit. Notice if there's a fluidity in there, or that there is a rigidity. Hello, welcome. And using the gentle pads of your fingers, moving and exploring this area right below the manubrium. You can even tap the manubrium for a minute. You'll get a little bony vibration going. Yeah, get that bony vibration going for a moment. See if you can let the resonance move through the tissue. Hello, welcome. So here, tapping on the bony and then resonance, and then going down the sternum. Now do this gently if it's producing any kind of perturbation in you, meaning any little activation. What you want is this vibration that you can relax into. Or you just want to wake up the tissue area. Now, the interesting thing about the clavicles is they are what hold on our shoulders. In a way, it's the collarbones into the sternum, into the ribs, and the ribs go into the spine. There's no other thing except traveling this pathway down into the front of the ribs here that does anything to connect the arms into the spine. And how they connect matters, and often with adoption or early attachment wounds, the heart gets guarded, or this tissue doesn't want to reach for connection. When you see a baby who's distressed, they'll often have a startle, which is a reach back, an arch back, and then they'll resolve it by reaching and taking hold of the mother. I saw this with really explicitly when I worked in Africa, and I was out with a group, and we were watching the monkeys, and all of a sudden an alarm cry went through the monkey tribe. Ah! And then all the babies, they were like, wah! And then they grabbed their mother's fur, and the mothers ran away. So this instinctive reflex is all about attachment and safety. And so if this area gets rigid or hugely disappointed or overly confused and guarded, a natural fluidity might get interrupted. And that fluidity is what can build a resiliency of heart, so that as a grown-up, you're not taking things so personally, like feeling rejected by others. You might realize, oh, they're just having a bad day. But if your eyes are cueing for signals of rejection, you're going to go to that place. Especially, I think that happens if there's adoption. And sometimes I think with adoption, and this was years of working with adopted children, adults, their families, there's a unique nervous system signature. And that's why I created a special course specifically on adoption, because I want to help the children, the adults who were adopted, the stress on the families and the adoptive parents. And I want therapists to really, really, really be willing to treat this and to know how to do it. Because it's a very intense existential shock. And that means it's right at the core of identity belief, belief about the world, and confusion about trust and mistrust in relationship. And there's often a deep panic underneath a perhaps masked bravado or perfectionism. These are all the pieces of the puzzle. So how's your chest going? How's the little questioning here, movement, flow? This area right here above the center of the sternum, but right in here is the area of the thymus. And the thymus is an endocrine gland. When I think of it in its health, its relational, emotional health, not just immune function, because its big job is the immune system, the lymphatic system. It makes T cells. T is for thymus. And T cells go after bad bacteria. We have B cells in our bones and T cells manufactured in the thymus. And our lymph is so, so important. So here, seeing if you have a little movement in the thymus area. Now, if there's been a shock to the heart, that can affect the thymus as well. And the thymus has the ability to, channel the lymph not into alarm, but into resiliency. In body-mind centering, the lymph gives us clarity. And when there's adoption stress, what's often missed is clarity. Things were so confusing. So confusing. And so we want to have that clarity and ability to ground and stay present. I have to figure out a better way to hold my phone here. I need to get a tripod, but that's why I'm wobbling a bit. So now trace down through your throat. There's big lymph channels right along the sides of the throat, and the big lymph nodes right up under the jaw. Hello, welcome. So bringing that lymphatic drainage, you could say, ability of the lymph to feel supported, not just be the supporting fluid to protect you, but be supported by blood flow, by the rebound of the blood and the lymph right in the O-rings in anatomy. That's the capillary place where lymph and blood come together. Now that you've got a little more fluidity, check in with the back of your heart. And specifically that area between the heart and the spine where it could have gotten a little rigid. We know there's a ventral vagal nerve and a dorsal vagal nerve, but basically it means that if we're relaxing, we've got a good blood flow to our organs. And that would be the ventral vagus not being in alarm. So here we are, bringing our embodiment awareness. We're going to start talking about kind of some tough ideas around safety and attachment. So now I'm doing micro movement. You can do it too. Micro movement to see if I can get into the tissue right next to the spine. So doing those micro movements, because you can bet someone who's been adopted has a lot of infant startle. And that's where the chest freezes, the heart is confused, the eyes get all confused, they look around for safety and connection. And so there's so much in the perceptual field that gets messed with. So what I'm having you do now is play right in your torso, right in your chest, throat, heart area, including the rib attachments. So, hello, welcome. In the rib attachments, bring almost like you could rest back into a comforting pillow. It has to be firm enough so you can, and then you can feel the spring to come forward. We're going to work with a little springy action here. And this is right, the area of T12 is where there's a big vertebral shape change. And T12 is where the diaphragm attaches. This big vertebral shape change is right where a spring needs to be available, because you're going from the upper curve of the torso into the lower curve of the lumbar. Hi, Mary, welcome. So having your hand with the pads of your fingers resting gently along your thymus area and helping the skin move. Sometimes our skin, which is a pretty strong fabric, can get rigid. So help the skin move. And look for the springiness to start going through your spine. Can you get a little, springy spring going through the spine? You might notice a little wave action. You might notice your scapula going down a bit more, not clinging up to your ears. You might notice your chin folding in a little with a flexion or lengthening along the back of the neck. All of these little shifts produce movement and fluidity of tissue. Once you get the undulating wave of the spine going, now let's play with sort of the DNA spiraling. Think of your spine having sort of DNA spirals, and feel cross-laterally the helix that goes through the spine. We have straight, spinal nerve channels, gray matter, white matter, glial cells. And then we have the ability, because of our musculature, to rotate. So those little tiny muscles are informing the spiral rotation of the spine. Now check if you've got that all the way from your sacrum. You could isolate to explore. Let's isolate by pressing down into the sacrum or down into the sit bones and getting a little feedback where the sacrum and each pelvic half meet. Is there mobility? Or not too much mobility, right? Some of you have overly mobile joints. So you want stability balanced with motility, ability to move. And the motility is often reserved for organ naming and mobility for joint and bone. But explore, can you stabilize your pelvis and turn your upper body? Can you engage your pelvis and rotate so that one leg slides forward and back of the other? A cross-lateral movement, that's for our upright walking and even our crawling. Okay, that's a little beginning somatic. You can continue to play with the ability to use movement to help you regulate. Put a 5 in the comment if you move too much. You can't sit still. Put a 3 in the comment if you go frozen and immobile. I want to see what you're wrestling with so I know how to support you on a nervous system level. If you're someone who freezes, gentle touch, thawing out the freeze response, using cellular breath, using self-touch is wonderful. If you are the 5 and you have to move all the time, containment is the goal. Can you give that movement a place to live inside your body so that you're not overly wired and having to express through space, but you can contain? Those are significant differences, and a lot of times in psychotherapy, people have the goal of expression. But for some people, the goal is containment. Especially if you grew up with a very dramatic father or mother, you might not know how to contain and relax and enjoy. And that's what we want for our little adopted kiddos. That's what we want for adults who were adopted. And we want to help parents who do adopt to know how to help with the containment so their child doesn't become the lightning rod of attention and in a way destroy the family matrix, because other siblings will get jealous, the parents will have to, monitor all the time and lose connection with each other. So let's give a big prayer for all of those people who lost the sense of their genealogy at birth. They lost their ancestors, or sometimes their location on the planet. They were moved to a new country. They had different languages. It's a lot of perceptual adjustment, and that adjustment can create confusion. Hello, welcome. So now, with this ability to breathe and move, let's talk about attachment. Attachment is a therapy word for how do you bond? How do you connect with someone? How do you feel safe? And it's good to know that you could have a really good social world, but then when it becomes your intimate world, you could get really confused and triggered and try to play out your adoption attachment. And that is crazy making for a partner, because they don't know what happened to you. You almost seem like two different people. I've just heard some horror stories around couples and the relationship agony when people start working through their adoption story without it being named properly and worked with. Because ultimately, if you have been adopted, it's up to you to get the healing, not to expect your partner to heal you. Now, isn't that an irony right away for adoption and attachment? Because little babies or even the children who are waiting to be adopted can't do it themselves. They have to wait for the other to do it for them, to pick them up, to bond with them, to love them. And so there is a power struggle dynamic that lives inside adoption. And it's because the adoptee could feel like the victim of their adoption experience. But that is not a good idea. That is not a good idea. Okay, so then what do? You take charge of it. That's why I created my adoption course. It's very specific, 10 weeks with reflective writing, theory, videos, group healing sessions. It's really there for you to start to tease apart the adoption imprint. And if you're watching this as a therapist and you want a waiting list for your clinical practice, start working with adoptees. Start working with children and families who adopt, because they need the help from a very clear understanding of the adoption wound and the precognitive impressions. And working with adoption, or kids in general, is a combination of compassion, behavior modification, because you do have to take charge of it, helping a child adjust their behavior. And you do have understanding and compassion and empathy. But the parenting job is a big one because it demands all of those. You can't just have empathy. I call that fierceness and compassion. If you lose the fierceness, the kids will run all over you. If you're too fierce, then they won't like you and you won't like yourself. So the balance of fierceness and compassion is essential as a parenting skill and very useful in couples' relationship dynamics as well. Any questions out there? Any comments? We're going to dive into attachment, and I want to know if you have anything you're working with. In the meantime, you can press on the pads of your eyes. Gently, don't do this if you're wearing contacts. Gentle. Because the eyes, we want them to be resilient. And when the eyes get the anxiety of attachment, they will not rest back into the eye sockets. You'll be too far forward in your eyeballs. So getting a little, hello, welcome, a little movement, a little shaping of the eye socket, letting your eyes rest into your ears. Attachment in its clinical, and if you want to learn more about this specifically, you can take my Healing Birth Trauma course. My books that come with that course really have attachment work and character styles spelled out and lots of body tools. Or you can get the books and read them. And with adoption, we're going to talk about, if you want to write these down, there's controlling attachment styles. Why is that important to understand? Because adoption has chaos in it. It has the chaos of where do I live? Who am I? Where's my mother? These imprinting stories, some of you might have, read the children's book, Are You My Mother? And that book was actually written by the scientist who did the imprint studies, where he would put, I forget if it's geese with ducks or ducks with geese, but he would put an egg in there that would hatch that's a different species. And then that little geese duck would wander around but not really be accepted by the bigger tribe of geese. Or maybe it was a gosling he put with the duck family. Either way, it just means you're not the same. You don't fit in. And everybody can see the difference. And so they treat you like an object rather than getting to know you, because their first impression is the visual. You don't look the same. So what do you do about all that? Well, as an adult, you figure it out. It's not about your looks. It's about your essence. So with controlling attachment, Sometimes a child will develop controlling punitive. That means they will be punishing the parents, punishing their siblings, trying to gain the upper hand by being dominating. Sometimes they will be controlling caregiving, caring overly much for others and losing their own needs. It's hard to help a child when they lose touch with their own needs and they're so focused on your needs that they can't relax. Or caring for someone else helps them to relax. Then we have, and these of course, the best attachment is secure. And I always encourage people to develop secure adult self-attachment so you can be in partnership with someone. Take a big breath right into your back ribs and take your hand, the back of your hand, place it behind your body, kind of toward your lower ribs and your kidney area. Hello, welcome. Now, as you breathe, can you feel the movement? The accordion opening and closing right at the heads of the ribs. You may have to go a little further into your spine. Breathing. Because there's big, strong back muscles which have habits. A question, okay, can I focus on those kids who are focusing into others' needs? Sometimes that's a way to manage internal anxiety. If you don't know whether you fit in, and you don't know whether you did something wrong, you don't even know what it was, which comes with adoption, then you can manage your anxiety by, picking up toys for someone or helping them too much, doing activities they could be doing for themselves. And partly doing the activities is a motoring. It means you're moving, not just frozen. So that could be the healthy intent of that kind of attachment style. But what you want to do, what I love to do, is get hula hoops. Literally big hula hoops for adults and smaller ones for kids. And I have people put the hula hoops over themselves and sit inside them. You could, as a parent, read a book. You could, teach your child how to work on a little puzzle. If they're a young child, you can have those little wooden puzzles inside their hula hoop. So they get a sense of containment, so they're not always looking out to others' needs. And they can relax inside their own system. Now, in addition to the confusion, the chaos management, attachment styles, there is the style, there's the, the style that's talked about, which is ambivalent. That means you enter a room and your kid may or may not look up and say hi. Now, unfortunately, with screen time, they often don't look up. They barely acknowledge you when they're addicted or focused into screen time. That's why you don't want to allow your kids so much screen time. They lose the perceptual fluctuation of self and other because their eyes literally are locked into another world. So parents who have not found out how to limit screen time, especially for the young ones, please do. There's lots of resources on the internet about that, but it literally can change the perceptual field and the movement of the muscles around the eyes. Big breath. So if a child's ambivalent, they won't know to come up and get a hug. They won't know that you're, available to help them regulate. And that's what is very big in adoption. Because that child, from the very too early time, didn't have consistency of smell, contact, sight, perception of the mother or father, it wasn't consistent. And there were high arousal babies all around. If they were in an orphanage, you can bet there were crying babies. So that high arousal can have someone go inward a little. And then they don't know how to reach out for the contact. Let's try this. Take your hand, get really chaotic with your hand, get chaotic all around your body. Whoa, right? Ooh. It gets too chaotic. And what do? You either freeze, you try to control it, or you might just go a little inward, a little too far in to be able to come out. What do? You're too far in, and so it takes a big effort to come out, and that effort can be exhausting. And if, think about this for a moment. If you're waiting to be adopted, say you're an older child and you're waiting to be adopted, and people come, and they try to match you up and everything, and then there's this possibility and disappointment. Possibility and disappointment. And I can tell you, I worked with the abused foster kids who hopefully were going to get adopted, and it was not uncommon that once there was an adoptive family available, and the kid would do an overnight, the kid would act out so much that the adoptive family said, no way, this is going to be too much work. Like one kid who was 9, he was just a great little guy, but he was so, he was so physically strong, and his anxiety was so strong at times, that we had to do the containment model with him. He had what might be called reactive attachment disorder. And there's so much inner reactivity and need to be aggressive that the child can't contain and regulate. And so what did this child do? Poor kid, he was 9. I was just heartbroken for him. His first overnight with his adoptive family, he literally broke the window, tore the bed apart, and threw it out the window. So he had to break a whole bunk bed set, and throw it out the window because he couldn't tolerate the anxiety. So don't let your kids suffer like that. Really, come on to this adoption course. I can tell you the nuances of the nervous system, and you could get practical interventions that you can use, or if you're a therapist, practical interventions you can use to help, because it does, and that's what you want. So we've talked about controlling punitive, we've talked about controlling caregiving, and we've talked about ambivalence. Another one is anxious. Anxious means your child will track you all the time. And if you're the spouse of someone who has anxious attachment, you don't get to relax because they're always in your business. They're always, helping, they're just can't settle, and that anxiety is palpable. I used to work in Africa, and what I learned by watching the animals is the animals don't make moral decisions. If an animal's sick or old, it's eaten. It's not a moral issue, it's a practical issue. And in a way, there's a part of our human nature that has to be practical. And if you're with someone who's always anxious, it's not your nervous system is going to get irritated or feel invaded or feel like they're always clinging to you and you can never fill them up. So that is what I've seen in couples, which is exhausting for the spouse or the partner of someone who's adopted. That's why it's important for anyone who's on this call who's an adoptee to please come through my course and be in the group healing field. The results that people who have taken the course have shared, it's like life-changing. And that's what I want. Right into the primal nervous system about, is the world safe? Will I survive? And ultimately, will you keep me safe? And as an adult, it's you who has to keep yourself safe. Not guarded, not withdrawn, not defensive, but able to navigate the complexity of adult stress and stay relational. Isn't that more fun? Much more fun. So with someone who's anxious, you can practice sitting inside your hula hoop and just letting the world happen around you without you jumping outside of yourself and being out there instead of enough in here. So that's really, really key. Being enough in here. Big breath. Anxious, ambivalent. Now there's also avoidant. Avoidant means you deliberately redirect your attention away from another person. Not do you just go inward and be a little ambivalent, but avoidant is you're actually redirecting to avoid their presence. That can be heartbreaking for adoptive parents. If you have a little child who's avoidant attached because of adoption, I want to help you what to do, because you can repattern the nervous system. Literally, when you understand sensory motor and you understand hypersensitive challenges, you understand proprioception, you understand the special senses of the face and head, you can really, really help repair through physical interventions, not just emotional interventions, so that the body gets more resilient. And that's my specialty, that's my passion, because I like changes that last and make a real difference. And I had to go back. I wasn't adopted, but I was born premature and whisked away, hi Johanna, into an incubator. And that had me have some of these avoidant, ambivalent, whatever, attachment styles. And so I had to go back and repair it, because for 17 days I had no idea where my mom was. I had no touch. And for adoptive babies, it's a lot longer than 17 days. It's like the loss of a lifetime. So take a moment. Put your hand here against your skin, against your chest, and say hello, and just see if there's a heart bracing, a little heart armor, and see if your heart can soften and reach towards your hand. Can the heart reach? Because reach and take hold from a non-anxious place is what you want for secure attachment. You want to repattern the attachment wound and help it be secure. So the satisfaction cycle, if you have not downloaded that from my free PDF library, please do so, because those actions are how you can repattern physically. So you're not always trying to do everything emotionally, but getting the physical support for the ground of emotion to rest. Big breath. Turn your head, move your spine, and just notice, are you touched in some way by your own story, or by the story of friends and their children, or by the story of some of your friends? And let any of that feeling moved be a special prayer, a little sense of sending love to all those confused and lost little babies who don't know, they've just begun this journey of the adoption imprint. And we want to send them that healing field so that adoption is not a forever trauma. And that's very, very key. But you do need the resources. And that's why I created my course. I didn't want to, but whoops. I didn't want to create it, but my web person's friends, their adopted child had just committed suicide after 16 years of raising him. So I thought, okay, I'll really study and get the tools and get the resources. And so, all those parents who have raised children and lost them to suicide, all those little ones who don't know if they are worthy or if they exist on an existential level, if they've done something wrong. We want all of this to relax so that their soul's light can shine through. And again, we're not making everyone who's adopted have to have a bad experience. I'm just saying that there are commonalities inside the adoption imprint that can be relaxed out of the nervous system. So many adopted babies scream for days, years. I've worked with a lot of mamas who said, my baby screamed for the first year of their life. Can you imagine the auditory impact of that on the parent's field and the child? That high arousal will go to exhaustion. And sometimes it's just because they're trying to tell their story, or their internal fear is so great they don't know how to let it go. So big breath, stretch your armpits with your lymph. Reach behind you a little bit. Oh, make sure your shoulders are dropping down your back. Scapula down, anchored to your hip bones, as if your scapula are going in your back pocket if you have jeans on. They're dropping down and anchored into your back pocket. Do a little movement through the spine if you've been sitting. If you've been standing up and moving, that's a great way to listen to my little discourses. I used to do that in all my classes. I'd be in the back of the room doing Qigong or, Tai Chi or micro movements while someone was giving a lecture, so I could integrate and find my own wisdom to what they were saying. So here we are. Blessings to all of you. Please, please, please tell your friends about my adoption course. If you're a therapist, join. If you're an adoptee, join in. And if you're a parent, because there is a way to heal the adoption imprint. Thanks for being part of the community. So much love to you and wisdom and continuing to grow and heal and share the tools that heal. I'm Annie Brook from the Brook Institute, and blessings and enjoyment of this day.